Hi everyone, welcome back to Haftarah Halfhour, and this week we are looking at the Haftarah for Vayigash. Well, joining us again this week is Rabbi Joshua Neely. Welcome back, Rabbi Neely.
Always good to be here.
And we are looking this week at Ezekiel 37:15 through 28. From my tradition, I'm very familiar with the picture that's formed in this, and I'm looking forward to digging in a bit more and putting some labels and definitions on some of the groups that were mentioned. But can you give us, in a nutshell, some of the kind of loose connections between this and the Torah portion, that this is the Haftarah too?
So Vayigash is the Torah portion of reconciliation. This is the Torah portion where the brothers and Joseph are finally revealed to one another, and they reconcile, and they bury the hatchet, you might say. Maybe that's a bit of an Americanism. And the two main characters throughout the story of Vayigash, right from the beginning, are Judah and Joseph. And as we're going to see in this particular Haftarah, in this section from Yechezkel, from the prophet Ezekiel, Judah and Joseph, or Ephraim, Judah's son, who becomes a stand-in word for the tribes that came from Joseph, are not just brothers. They are also the symbolic representations of the northern and southern kingdoms. That is to say, Joseph, as represented by Ephraim, and sometimes as Manasseh as well, are the stand-in words for the northern kingdom of Israel that split off from the Davidic line after the death of Solomon. And Judah is the stand-in term for the southern kingdom that stayed under the rule of the Davidic line.
Just to make it a little bit more clear for me and for the people watching, the people who lived in the north, they were made up of lots of different tribes, right? And the people in the south were also made up of a mixture of tribes. It wasn't just one tribe living in the south and the rest in the north.
Well, so the northern kingdom was primarily composed of the tribal territories of 10 tribes, and it's easier to point out the opposite. And the southern tribes were made up of the tribal territories, really, of 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. There was still much cross-border traffic. This was not the age of passport control, where people couldn't go. And so many people who were from the north ended up in the south, and vice versa. It wasn't as though you were limited to living only in your tribal spot. People moved around a great deal. The strict tribal allocations really began to fall apart with the beginning of the Davidic kingship in the first place, where we became more of one nation rather than only tribes. So yes, you end up with what the territory of the 10 tribes in the north and the territory of 2 tribes in the south. And then with the Levi'im, sort of sprinkled liberally throughout all of it, but of course with a great concentration around Jerusalem.
So that kind of feels like a commonwealth. So I'm English. I live here in Ireland. I'd call myself a European, but I'm also English. But I'm not necessarily living in England. So the people that live in Judah, they're not from the tribe of Judah. This is just a collective term because they were probably the people who, when the land was first inhabited, they were probably the most populating people.
Right. So there would be a disproportionate number of people from certain tribes in the different tribal allocations, but not exclusive to those territories. And yeah, so the breakdown of the tribes happened quite soon with the beginning of the kingship, the monarchy. Because the whole nation was now being ruled from a central authority rather than by tribal chieftains. And as such, people began to drift and move as they chose. And by the time we get to the death of Solomon and the next generation with the split, you don't have pure tribal zones at all anymore. So we really are referring more by the territorial than the demographic description of the areas.
We're going to start in Ezekiel 37. 15. The word of the Lord came to me, and you, O mortal, take a stick and write on it of Judah and the Israelites associated with him, and take another stick and write on it of Joseph the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel associated with him. I'm kind of reminded straight away. I know before we started recording, we were talking about using the word Messianic, but this is kind of an end times revelation. It's the Messianic era that is being spoken about here.
Absolutely. Ezekiel is one of the most prolific of the prophets to focus on the end of days, as it's referred to in Jewish quarters. And this prophecy, the whole Haftarah, is really focused on that time, on that zone of when the Messiah has come, Mashiach, and when the world is being set right. This is one of the many things that will be taking place.
It's in Christian theology, we have a really laid out eschatology of what's going to happen in the end of days, and there's literally the end of days. But I get the impression as I go through the Tanakh that the end of days is really the beginning of. It's like the end of an era or an epoch, and that life is going to carry on. It's just going to be different to what we've known before. The world's not just going to combust.
There's definitely the world is not going to combust. The world's not going anywhere. There's a lot of discussion of exactly what it will look like and how that process will unfold, because the words of the prophets, despite some people's claims, are not self-evident in such fine detail that you could shoot a movie according to this. I know there are people out there who claim that they know exactly what's going to happen and what day it's going to happen on and who's going to be standing where in the photo. But the words of the prophets are not written with that level of specificity, because it wasn't telling us how to shoot a movie. It was telling us what we should hope for and what we should anticipate. But definitely this is trying to give us a feeling of one of the key features for the Jewish people at this point in history. But history will continue afterwards.
So back in verse 16, it says, of Judah and the Israelites associated with him. What does it mean by the Israelites that are associated with him?
Well, as we were just discussing, Judah is not speaking exclusively about the tribe of Judah. It's speaking about the territory of Judah, meaning the southern kingdom. And so when it says of Judah and the Israelites associated with him, he's referring to basically the entirety of the southern kingdom. Whether people are from the tribe of Judah originally or not, that whole group of Israelites, meaning the children of Jacob, the descendants of the whole nation, are going to be represented by one stick. So again, we're not saying that Judah means only the Judah people. We're saying that Judah means the southern territory that was ruled by the Davidic line. And all of those people associated with that territory, with that kingdom, are going to be represented by one stick. And then Ephraim, or Joseph, as symbolized by the term Ephraim, and all of the people who live up north, whatever tribes they may come from, are going to be represented by the second stick.
So God's speaking to Ezekiel, and he's saying, you've got one stick in one hand, you've got one stick in another, and he carries on to say, bring them close to each other so they become one stick, joined together in your hand. And when any of your people ask you, won't you tell us what these actions of yours mean? Answer them, thus says Lord God, I am going to take the stick of Joseph, which is the hand of Ephraim, and of the tribes of Israel associated with him, and I will place the stick of Judah upon it, and make them into one stick, and they shall be joined in my hand. I mean, we're talking about the... there's a lot going on here. I mean, even off this page, we're still missing... there's a lot of really great documentaries about these small pockets of people all over the world, in Ethiopia and other places, of these tribes, like Manasseh. But we're really talking about the bringing back of the ten lost tribes. They're being joined with Benjamin and Judah, or these two land masses, into one huge people, aren't we? One nation.
Exactly. The 10 tribes in the north. The territory of the 10 tribes in the north and the people who lived there were dispersed by Sennacherib, by the Assyrian emperor, when he conquered the northern tribes. And they, unlike the people who came from the south, which was conquered by the Babylonians later, the northern people were dispersed and scattered and really forced to assimilate and disintegrate into the surrounding other nations of the Assyrian Empire. It was part of their the Syrian Empire's technique for the Assyrian Empire's technique of keeping people from rebelling against them. So we never gave up on them, though. Even though they were amalgamated and blended and dispersed and essentially lost from any physical way of finding them, we always believed that in the long term, they, as descendants who deserved their inheritance of the covenant and their inheritance of being part of Judaism, would eventually, at the end of days, be brought back to be reintegrated and rebound to the people who were from the south, which had an easier time. Not that Babylonian exile was any great picnic, as Ezekiel himself could tell you, but at least we were able to retain some cohesiveness. We were able to have communities in Babylon, and that allowed us to stay together and return together rather than be scattered to the winds. So we look forward in the end of days when those who have been scattered will be able to be reclaimed and brought back to be part of the whole.
So I guess technically on paper, the Messianic age requires a Messiah, and these events will happen in the Messianic age. So if there's ever any doubt about a contender for the Messiahship, we'll know maybe that person has nailed the job because we'll see these events unfold.
This and other things as well. There's a long discussion in different sections of Jewish history of what is considered to be a valid contender for the title Messiah. And there have been people throughout Jewish history that have received popular or even rabbinic acclaim as being a candidate for Messiah. Bar Kokhba was one of the most famous who led a revolt against Rome. But if they fail to deliver the goods, if it isn't an era of peace, if it isn't an era of reunification, if it isn't an era that is followed by all nations coming to God, then however great that individual may have been, they were not the Messiah. They were not Mashiach in the capital Mem sense. And we can still respect them and applaud their achievements, if any. There have been, unfortunately, some very bad pretenders to the title, but there have been some very good people who did good work and tried very hard, but that doesn't make you Mashiach. It just makes you a wonderful person.
You shall hold up before their eyes the sticks which you have inscribed. You shall declare to them, Thus said the Lord your God, I am going to take the Israelite people from among the nations they have gone to, and gather them from every quarter and bring them to their own land. I will make them a single nation in the land on the hills of Israel, and one king shall be king of them all. Never again shall they be two nations, and never again shall they be divided into two kingdoms. Nor shall they ever again defile themselves by their fetishes and their abhorrent things, by their other transgressions. I will save them in all their settlements where they sinned, and I will cleanse them, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God. It's one of my favorite lines, and it pops up again and again, with the exception of Ruth, when it's the other way around. But I love that. I love that line. So we're again carrying on the theme. He's going to find these lost people and bring them back as one nation instead of two.
And on the one hand, you know, I think a lot of people make more of this Haftarah than is necessary because they're looking for a miracle. And in fact, there's a long discussion in rabbinic commentary of, is this stick coming together miraculously joined, or is this just a visual aid? That is to say, when Ezekiel is walking around and putting these two sticks together in one hand, do they literally fuse in some miraculous kind of way? Or does he just move them from two separate hands and put them in one hand, and That's the magic trick. And I think part of the issue here is that people want to see the Hollywood fire and flash and bang of a miracle. And they don't realize that what Ezekiel is describing to his generation, and it should be to our generation as well, this is, I don't believe this could ever happen kind of miracle level. Fine, God can part the sea, I can believe that. God can, make the sun stand still, no problem there. But God's going to get the entire nation of Israel from top to bottom, north, south, east, west, to all be together? That's just crazy talk. That's just impossible. And so I think people fail to realize just how miraculous the prophecy is that Ezekiel is making here, of the reunification of our people from all across the world. We have difficulty reunifying our people, even with those that we know are our people, let alone our long lost brothers and sisters. And yet that's exactly what Ezekiel is promising, and what God is promising by extension. And that will be an incredible miracle of true restoration.
I'm imagining that, okay, you get these two sticks, and they're alive, and I mean, wood does graft together. We don't know these are two different. I mean, Israel's one thing. Maybe these two sticks are one thing. You can bind these two sticks together. Maybe this is something that's going to happen over a prolonged period of time. We see people making Aliyah and returning back to Israel every day, and again, we see these amazing programs about these families who have generations and generations and generations of history, of oral history. Their Judaic customs, when they don't live in an area which is necessarily one with Jewish people. It could be that this is happening now. It could be something is it possible that something that's just happening over lifetimes?
Well, speaking as someone who has family history that's precisely that, I don't know that I can say that this is the end that we are in, or how long that process would take. But it is certainly true that there are many people who were lost to Israel in the broadest sense, that have found their way back. Like I said, from my own family history, my mother's mother and her family were Anusim. They were people from Spain who had converted under protest and maintained their Judaism in secrecy for hundreds of years, and slowly lost much of their actual teachings to the point that they didn't know they were Jewish, but they were still doing Jewish things. The most famous, of course, is the lighting of candles on Friday for no apparent reason. And in fact, when my mother was raised, she was raised as being sort of a generic Christian, because the family tradition hadn't passed to her line. And she converted when she was 15 years old because she felt, when she walked into a synagogue with a friend for the first time, that she was home, that this is where she needed to be. And it wasn't until 25 years later that we were doing more family genealogy that we began to uncover the family truth, and worked out the roots of the family, and have now traced our lineage all the way back 1,000 years. So it's incredible that people are able to come back. But that's just one family. What Ezekiel is talking about is potentially hundreds of millions of people.
My servant David shall be my king over them. There shall be one shepherd for all of them. They shall follow my rules and faithfully obey my laws. Thus they shall remain in the land which I gave to my servant Jacob, and in which your fathers dwelt. And they and their children and their children's children shall dwell there forever. My servant David as their prince for all time. I'm going to stop there for a second. We often read that, I can't believe how much is coming up, but the Messiah is going to come from the Davidic line.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a understanding in some, because I've often wondered, we get the Valley of Dry Bones in Ezekiel as well. David at this stage is bones. Is it conceivable that David is the king in this passage, or is it simply a picture of the shoot of David or the branch of David?
It is discussed whether or not when Ezekiel says my servant David, that he means the actual guy, David, son of Jesse, and full stop, the same guy who killed Goliath, and no substitute. But it's generally rejected. The idea is being, as you say, that David here is being used as a stand-in for the Davidic line, and that the descendant of David will fill the role of Mashiach, of the Anointed One, who will unify the people and lead them. So that's the generally accepted interpretation, but it is one that has been discussed. The alternative has been discussed.
I will make a covenant of friendship with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I will establish them and multiply them. I will place my sanctuary among them forever. My presence shall rest over them. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And when my sanctuary abides among them forever, the nations shall know that I, the Lord, do sanctify Israel. Are we talking about a temple when he speaks about a sanctuary?
Yes, Ezekiel is one of the clearest prophets for discussing the Third Temple period during the days of Mashiach. Now, when I say clear, don't get me wrong, it's not as though it's easy to understand, but it's clear that he's talking about the temple. And so he's definitely referencing the idea of a fully restored temple in Jerusalem.
Well, it feels like it's never really. It feels like it's a full stop. I mean, we've got this image that Moses is bringing the 12 tribes and this huge mixed multitude that makes Israel, and is going to lead it into Israel, and they're going to settle, and God's going to be there looking after them. And it never really quite works out. And here we are, thousands of years later, and it feels that this is the full stop to the beginning of that journey.
This would be the final stop for not just the people of Israel, but for all the nations of the world, which is what he's saying. And again, it's not a full stop in the sense that life is over. It's not a full stop in the sense that the world stops or that history is done. It's a sense that the story has run its course, and now we can finally move to the sequel. And there's really a very broad arc throughout the entire Tanakh, throughout the entire Bible, that goes from the loss of the peaceful and non-suffering paradise of Eden through the long and difficult process of gaining a spiritual and moral foothold in a essentially corrupt world, and slowly and very, very painfully making that world better and better to reduce human suffering more and more, and to bring us closer and closer to God. And really, Mashiach represents the end time, when that chapter is done, when we've finally made this world what it was supposed to be, and made it by agreement with God rather than just by capitulation or being an automaton, that we're not being connected to God merely by instinct, but by choice, and that we're now choosing consistently correctly as an entire world. And so the suffering that humans cause one another and themselves will finally be at an end. And then it's the new beginning. Then it's the world that awaits us in that wonderful new state.
And may we live to see it. That would be fantastic.
Speedily in our days, as we say. Mm-hmm. One more little thing, you can work it in as you want for talking about the Messianic age as a whole. When we read prophecies about the end of days, there's a very good framework for understanding them that was put together by a great scholar named Gershom Scholem. Zichrono livracha, may his memory be for a blessing. And he says they essentially come in three varieties: conservative, restorative, and utopian. Utopian means, looking forward to the perfect vision of what the world should be. Restorative means to recapture the beauty of what was there at the beginning of our relationship with God. And conservative meaning to maintain and preserve the true ways that God has tried to give us. And one of the great things about this particular Haftarah is it represents all three. It gives us a future vision that is beautiful in a way that the history never has been, a utopian view. It also harkens back to what we did have that we want to reclaim. Our space in Jerusalem, our connection to God, and the faithfulness that we showed at the very beginning. And the conservative aspect, meaning that we will be able, in this new perfection, to be able to follow the ways that God gave us, to follow the rules and to follow the mitzvot. And it's amazing that Ezekiel is able to do that in 13 verses.
Well, I think that's the perfect conclusion to the show. That's lovely. So there we are, boys and girls. That was this week's Haftarah Half Hour. Stick around to the end of the show, and you will find the portion for next week, so you can read up ahead. Thank you, Rabbi Neely, for joining us again.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
And please like and subscribe and share this video, and we'll see you all again very soon. Bye-bye.